The kitchen clock ticked like a metronome for worry. Sarah sat at her small table with the bills fanned out in front of her, a highlighter uncapped and useless in her hand. The overhead light buzzed softly, the kind of sound you only notice when the room is otherwise very, very quiet. She had done everything the way she was told to. Got the job, showed up early, stayed late, paid the minimums, promised herself that next month would be different. And yet the numbers on the statements seemed to grow in the dark like weeds. She picked up one envelope, then another. Past due, minimum due, interest charged. The words had become a language she never wanted to learn. Sarah closed her eyes and let the truth land. Hard work alone wasn't getting her out. She didn't need more shame. She needed a way out that actually worked. Here is the question this story will answer for you as it did for Sarah. Why do some people dig for years and never get free, while others use a few simple moves and feel momentum in weeks? Before this hour is over, you'll know 3 simple tricks that Sarah used to pay off debt faster than she thought possible, and how to bend them to your life without living on rice and guilt. But this won't be a lecture. You'll walk with Sarah through the late-night panic, the small wins, the slip-ups, and the quiet shift when money stops being a monster in the closet and becomes something she could direct with calm. By the time the credits roll, you'll have a plan you can start today, not someday. Before we dive in, make one decision. If you're serious about changing your money story, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this series, and tell me in the comments the very first debt you want gone. Name it. Credit card, personal loan, store card, put it in writing. If you want extra accountability, type, I'm in the month you'll make your first extra payment. Now, take a breath and sit with Sarah at that table. Hear the clock. Feel the weight of numbers that don't add up. And watch what happens when she stops guessing and starts using a simple system. 3 tricks, 1 steady path. Let's begin. Sarah's mornings always began the same way, with the sound of her phone buzzing before the alarm. She used to think it was friends checking in or a reminder about some meeting. Now, more often than not, it was a notification from her bank. Balance low, payment due. Little red flags that turned her days sour before she even left her bed. By the time she slipped into her office chair at work, Sarah had already spent an hour running numbers in her head. The rent was fixed. The grocery bill never seemed to shrink. Her car loan, non-negotiable. And then there were the credit cards. 3 of them, each with its own interest rate, each demanding more than she had left to give. She tried splitting the minimum payments, but it felt like feeding scraps to a monster that always came back hungrier. What made it worse was how invisible it all was. To her coworkers, Sarah looked like she was doing fine. She smiled, wore her hair neat, laughed at the right jokes in the break room. But behind her careful mask, she was drowning. On payday, her account would fill like a bucket under a faucet. Within 48 hours, it was nearly empty again. Bills claimed their share. Interest nibbled at the corners, and what little remained evaporated on gas and groceries. She called it money quicksand. The harder she kicked, the deeper she sank. Her friends invited her out sometimes. Dinners, movie nights, weekend getaways. But Sarah had learned how to decline gracefully. Maybe next time, she'd say, pretending she was just tired or had errands to run. The truth was that she couldn't bear to spend money she didn't have. Yet even staying home wasn't free. The debts kept whispering louder each month. One night, she found herself sitting in the parking lot of a grocery store, staring at her debit card. She needed food, but she also needed to keep enough money in the account to cover the minimum due on her card. The math wouldn't work both ways. She sat there, frozen, fighting tears. For the first time, she wondered if this was just her life now. Paycheck to paycheck, dollar to dollar, year after year. That moment was her breaking point. She realized something no one ever told her in school or in her job. Paying the minimum wasn't paying off debt. It was paying to keep the chains on. Unless she found another way, she would never see the numbers go down. The question hung heavy in her chest. How do you break free when every system around you is designed to keep you stuck? Sarah didn't have the answer that night, but she made herself a quiet promise. She would not keep living like this. Somehow, some way, she would find a method to fight back. And that's when she stumbled across something unexpected, an idea so simple, it almost seemed too good to be true. One late evening, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the silence. Her bills were spread out before her like a battlefield, each envelope another enemy, threatening her peace of mind. The weight of it all pressed heavily on her chest, but for some reason, that night, she refused to cry. Instead, she whispered to herself, "There has to be a way out." And that's when the turning point began. Scrolling through her phone, she stumbled upon a short video, just a stranger talking about debt. She almost swiped away, but one sentence froze her. Most people pay their debt the wrong way. The trick isn't paying more, it's paying smarter. Sarah leaned forward, replaying the line. Could it really be true? All this time, she thought the only solution was to work harder, earn more, and somehow throw every last penny at her bills. But this person was talking about something different, something called the debt snowball method. The idea was simple, but revolutionary to her. Instead of drowning in the chaos of all her debts at once, Sarah would focus on paying off just the smallest debt first, while making minimum payments on the rest. When that small debt was gone, she'd take the money she used there and roll it into the next debt. And with each win, her momentum would grow, like a snowball rolling downhill, getting bigger and stronger. She sat back in her chair, her mind racing. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerless. She actually had a strategy, not just hope. That night, she grabbed a pen and notebook, listing out her debts from smallest to largest. Credit card number 3, only $350. A store card, $600. A personal loan, $1,200. Then the monsters, her car loan, her credit line, and beyond. But instead of panicking, she felt a spark. "I can do this," she whispered, clutching her pen like a weapon. The smallest balance, just $350, didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt like her first victory waiting to happen. That night, Sarah didn't cry herself to sleep. She went to bed with a smile, because she wasn't just dreaming anymore. She had a plan. And with that first trick, her journey to freedom had officially begun. The next morning, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a notebook, a calculator, and a stack of bills. Her first trick, the snowball method, wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a plan. She listed every debt she had, from smallest to largest. A store credit card with a $600 balance. A medical bill lingering at $1,200. The bigger ones, her student loans and car loan, loomed like mountains. But instead of staring at the mountain, she focused on the pebble. That $600 card. She tightened her budget, cutting out takeout, canceling a subscription she barely used, and even packing her lunch for work every day. At first, it felt like deprivation. But then, something shifted. Within 2 months, she crossed off that first debt, paid in full. And in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Momentum. Her second trick came into play, automatic payments. Instead of relying on willpower or memory, Sarah set up her accounts so that every payday, money flowed directly into her debt payments. She no longer had to fight the temptation of spending it elsewhere. The system was doing the heavy lifting. Week by week, she began to notice the weight lifting. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was winning. Then came a third trick, side hustle stacking. Sarah had always been good with words, so she picked up freelance writing gigs online in the evenings. At first, the extra $200 a month seemed small, but she didn't treat it like spending money. Every single dollar went straight to her debt, and slowly, something miraculous happened. She began to see balances vanish. One by one, accounts that had haunted her for years turned to zero. With each statement paid off, her confidence grew. Her friends noticed she no longer avoided talking about money. Her shoulders stood straighter. Her laughter came easier. Still, it wasn't easy. There were nights she stayed up late writing articles, mornings she woke up exhausted. There were moments she looked at her friends' social media, seeing them on trips she couldn't afford, and wondered if it was worth it. But then she would look at her list, see the lines she'd crossed out, and remind herself, this is working. This is progress. Sarah was learning what so many people never do. That small, consistent actions build unstoppable momentum. And once that momentum builds, it becomes harder to stop winning than to keep losing. Yet, even as she celebrated, life had a way of testing her resolve. Just when she thought she was finally safe from setbacks, a storm was gathering on the horizon. One that would threaten to undo everything she had worked so hard to achieve. For weeks, Sarah felt like she was finally moving uphill. The little wins stacked up. A credit card paid off, a new sense of control over her money, and even moments where she could breathe again. But life has a way of testing resolve, especially when progress feels too good to be true. It started with a phone call late one evening. Her car, the same one that carried her kids to school, the same one she used to get to work, broke down in the middle of the highway. The mechanic's voice on the other end of the line was heavy. "It's not just the engine, Sarah. You're looking at thousands of dollars to fix this." She froze, staring at the number written on the notepad. Thousands. More than she had saved. More than she could manage without turning back to the one thing she swore she'd escape, the credit card. And just like that, temptation crept in. The quick fix. The swipe of plastic. The familiar cycle waiting to pull her under. Sarah sat in her car that night, head resting against the steering wheel, tears burning her eyes. "What's the point?" she whispered to herself. "No matter how hard I fight, there's always something waiting to drag me back." The pressure mounted. Bills stacked higher. The debt monster she had been shrinking slowly began to grow teeth again. Friends and coworkers didn't see the battle raging inside her. On the outside, she smiled, laughed, and showed up like always. But inside, she was breaking. For the first time in months, Sarah considered giving up. Maybe people like me just aren't meant to be debt-free, she thought. This was her storm. Unpredictable. Relentless. A test designed to see if her newfound strength was real or just a passing phase. But Sarah didn't know yet. This setback would become the very turning point that showed her the difference between a temporary victory and a lasting freedom. Sarah sat in her car that night, exhausted, her eyes swollen from tears. The weight of the mechanic's words still echoed in her mind. Thousands of dollars. More than she had. More than she could see a way out of. But in the quiet, something shifted. She remembered the first notebook page where she had written her plan. Messy, uncertain, but filled with hope. She remembered the small victories, the pride in paying off a card, the feeling of breathing just a little lighter. And then a thought rose in her heart. If I stop now, everything I've fought for slips away. Instead of reaching for a credit card, Sarah reached for her notebook. She wrote 3 words in bold, shaky letters across the page. Not this time. The next morning, she called the mechanic back and asked a different question. What's the absolute minimum it takes to get the car running? He gave her a number, still big but not impossible. She decided then and there. She would pay cash. Sarah worked extra hours, picked up side shifts, and even sold items she no longer needed. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. And every dollar she scraped together felt like a declaration. I am not going back. Weeks later, when she finally handed the mechanic an envelope stuffed with crumpled bills, not a credit card, not borrowed money, she smiled through tears. That moment was more than a car repair. It was proof she could face a storm without losing herself. From that point on, Sarah's relationship with money transformed. She realized debt freedom wasn't about never facing setbacks. It was about learning how to stand tall when they came. And she did. Slowly but surely, she built her emergency fund, strengthened her budget, and carved out a new future. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was becoming the kind of woman who could weather anything. Her lesson was clear. Escaping debt isn't just about dollars. It's about determination. It's about refusing to let life's storms drag you back into chains. And in her story lies a question for all of us. When the storm hits, will we give in or will we rise stronger than before? So now I'll ask you, the listener, what's your not this time moment? If Sarah's story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs hope. Subscribe for more powerful stories like this. And remember, debt doesn't define you. Your choices do.